Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversation with Calvin, We the Species. Um, I always do chronological, although this is because of my commitment to the Garden State Film Festival and the stuff I've been doing. This interview with Lisa Foley, I'm going to tell you about her in a moment, is going to be pushed a little bit into April because I'm doing all this stuff with the Garden State Film Festival, and we got to do this the right way and do the correct platform for Lisa. Lisa Foley and I met uh, at Kay Wagner's, who is actually, I might as well, I'm not prepared, but I might as well. Kay Wagner and Kay is a best-selling author in and of herself. And she also started, she's a marketer, book marketer, and she also started something that has been transformative in my life and probably for Lisa too, the Bold Authors Network. It's a group of self-published authors that get together every Monday from 4 to 5. It's free, and Kay is about as giving and brilliant a person as I've ever met. And I had gone to the first one, and then there's Lisa, and through the processes of being, it's funny, it's actually I'm thinking about this, Lisa. The quality time that we spend, that solid quality time, that hour is intense and wonderful, and it's more time than I spend out there. I'm pointing to my wife out there. Come to think of it, but that's how intense and wonderful and transformative it is. And Kay has led me down the road, and she read my tortoise book. And anyway, to make a long story short, Kay and I sat down and we collaborated on 10 things I learned from the billionaire because I worked for the richest Italian in the world for 25 years, and you learn a lot of stuff. But anyway, Lisa and I are here because it's time. It's time for me to do my give backs to this amazing group and this amazing group of people that is
It
part
is
of
an
it.
amazing group, Calvin.
It
Yes.
truly is an amazing group. And Lisa is something I always thought about doing, and she's a quintessential short story writer, and not because I'm here, but she's wrote a series of short stories. We're going to talk about that from behind the fourth wall, and they're shedding my stalker. By the way, she's in Canada, in Ottawa, Canadian. Um, um, how we disappear and secrets untold. Well, that's separate. That's
Yeah, it
separate
is. Yep.
separate edition. So, short story writer, an amazing short story writer, and Lisa and I, we share a lot of deep, deep feelings about who we are and what we are as authors. We'll talk about that too. So, I'm so thrilled. You're here, and such an accomplished short story writer. Your journey, the whole thing. So, this little bit of a monologue is now concluded. If you want to say a few words, please do. A little
Sure.
background stuff. Take it away, Lisa.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Calvin. This is amazing. I'm so grateful. So, as Calvin said, she said, I live in Ottawa, Canada. I'm from a much smaller town, grew up in a much smaller town, Peterborough, which is a very small town, typical small town Ontario. I've been writing for 30 years or longer, and mostly short story writing. That's pretty much what I have focused on throughout my career, and that's where I've had some success. And Calvin, you and I have talked about what success means. Can mean a lot to the writer and a little to the rest of the world. But my success would be the times I've been published. I've had my short stories published in literary journals, which has been fabulous. And I have started this self-publishing a journey doing publishing some stories on KDP, which we'll talk about.
Okay, perfect, perfect. By the way, people don't realize uh, something else we talked about before we went on air. We've been doing a couple of these Zooms because it's funny, we see each other from 4 to 5 every week, but it's in the Zoom, and you're in a little box, and I'm in a little box, and there's 30 boxes up there,
Yeah, yeah.
this is better. It's a bigger box,
This is
actually.
better, bigger boxes.
Way better. There's no interference. It's way better. But short stories, yeah, I just interviewed a an Italian director the other day, and he did this amazing film that's getting all kinds of accolades. But the film, he got the rights from Stephen King. I told you that, Lisa. It's called The Reach, and it's kind of a supernatural type story, beautiful story. And it was so beautiful and so potent, the short story that Stephen King allowed him to do the movie, and then Bruce Springsteen came along and gave him a song to do under the umbrella. Why people should listen into this under the umbrella of short story and it gets uh, how it gets made into movies. I think Shawshank Redemption might have been a short story too. I don't remember.
It
It
might
could have.
have been.
It
But
could have.
yeah, we talked about it, that Philip K. Dick, famous short story writer in
Yeah.
the 40s, I think, Minority Report, Total Recall.
Right. Total Recall. I can't believe a short story. I love that movie.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
Minority Report too. I mean, just
Wow.
top notch, right?
Yeah.
So, and then this new movie that just came out, The Wicker Husband, which was a self-published short story by a UK writer,
Yeah.
and it's got Peter Dinklage, Olivia Colman, and Alexander Skarsgård in it, and that's huge.
Huge. Huge. By the
Yeah,
way, I said this to you. You knew it. I knew it. But one of the great Christmas movies of all time, It's a Wonderful Life, was
yeah.
written by Philip Van Doren Stern, a Rutgers graduate back in the
Rutgers
30s.
graduate.
And he couldn't sell that to no one. It was a short story, so he self-published like we
Yeah,
self-published
yeah,
all
yeah.
this chemistry that is here. So, question one.
Okay.
Question one. So what it's an appropriate question actually. So what first drew you to short story writing as your primary form of storytelling? Um,
I think it was when I started reading them. I started reading short stories when I was in my teens, I think. And back then, there wouldn't have been, which was like 100 years ago, there wouldn't have been all the online journals, of short stories and, even the print journals that there are out there of short stories. So they were traditionally published collections of short stories. And I just was struck by the depth of the story told in a short story form and like how much you can reveal in such a short period of time. And the more I read them, the more I realized that's the type of writing I want to do. And a lot of the stories that I was reading when I started were often about family. And maybe it's because I come from a big family, those stories really appealed to me.
okay. By the way, explanation, if you see me writing,
Yeah,
if you've seen me writing, you see
yeah.
me writing every Monday because I
We're both
really
note takers, Calvin.
I'm a note taker, and I may
I'm
be
the
one
note
of the
taker.
only interviewers in American history who takes notes while he's interviewing.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
a note taker like you. I've
yeah,
got my pen and book here. Yeah.
yeah. So I started already. I started uh, taking notes. Well, that's good. That
Yeah.
means what you're saying is important. So I'm taking notes.
Thank you.
Um, so you've described your story writing sometimes as intimate conversations. When did this voice first appear in you?
You know, I couldn't pinpoint a time exactly. It was probably a progression. I when I started writing, which like I started writing when I was in grade school, so and sort of off and on from grade school to high school, and then took a really focused on it when I was in my early 30s when I was home with two little kids. And I wrote in the third person. I wrote typical fiction, third person narrative fiction. And then as I started reading more short stories and liking that, form, and I started writing in the first person, it was the stories that I wrote in the first person that were the stories that I finished. And it seemed more, um, it just was a more comfortable way of writing for me. I like third person narrative, and I still do that, but the first person narrative was something that just really felt natural to me.
Okay, I'm just writing that down. Um, how did your writing evolve into breaking into third and fourth walls?
It's, again, it was a progression. It's the more I wrote in the first person narrative, the more I realized it felt like I was speaking directly to the reader. And I was very comfortable doing that. It was like having an intimate conversation, like we talked about. And just, it wasn't something I ever did consciously. It's just, I just started writing that way. Like I was telling one person something, and that's how the walls dissolved.
Okay. Okay. Um, do readers ever feel seen in ways that surprises them? Do they feel they're being seen? It's kind of heavy.
Well, the thing is, when you're a literary short fiction writer and you publish in literary journals, you don't get a response from people. I mean, you don't really know much more than the publisher said, I want to publish your story. You don't even know how many people have read your story. So it's hard to know, to gauge how people feel um, when they're reading the story. Is it just something I don't, you know, often get feedback on? Um, I think I think it makes some people uncomfortable, when they're being spoken to directly, but
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's brave. And that's the ruggedness of an author. And yeah, it's funny. I write for me. Uh, I write for me and whatever I want to write and how
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to, and you write for you, it's not a commercial. Yeah, we all listen. We want to sell books and short stories and stuff, but I have to write. I just have to. There was a song I forgot who sang it. I got to be me, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and I got to be me, and you got to be you. Uh, um, uh, what happens? And it's hard to it's hard, and we'll find some ways to unheavy this. Now it's a little on the heavy side, so be it, because it has to be for a bit. Uh, what happens when the reader realizes the narrator is speaking directly to them, and it's kind of a personal thing, which you do.
Yeah. I think two things can happen. I mean, I'm speaking, I think maybe everybody would have a different interpretation, and that's great because whatever the reader takes from the story is what they need. I think it can make them feel like a confidant, you know, um, and also, as I said, it can make them feel uncomfortable. I think that confidant relationship, when you think that the narrator is speaking to you, it's kind of like you're reading the journal, right? Like you're right there beside them, you know. You've got the front row seat to the action, everything that's going on, everything that the narrator or character is seeing or feeling or experiencing. Um, an example in on the small screen that I could give you is that series 1883 that Tim McGraw and Faith Hill ran, and it was fabulous, fabulous series. I loved it. But the best part was the narration. The main character narrated the whole story throughout, and I think that's what sets that series apart. And for me, maybe a writer, like it was the narrating. Like she told you what she was seeing, what she was experiencing, what she was feeling, what she was hoping for, and that having the main character speak directly to the viewer. I mean, I thought that was magic. I thought it was brilliant. And I think that's like, that's what I want. I want my readers to feel like, wow, they're talking to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking about readers, you trust readers to distinguish between fabrication and truth. Um, how would you define truth in fiction? Is there a definition?
Well, Stephen King has one. He says, fiction is the truth inside the lie, which I love that saying. And I think a lot of writers have great sayings about what it is we do or are trying to do. So I don't know that I would say I trust them to differentiate. Again, art, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think readers can decide what they think is fiction and what they think is the truth. One of my favorite collections of short stories is Tim O'Brien's The Things We Carried about Vietnam, the Vietnam War. And he talks in his stories, he's very really deep graphic details about the horrors they faced, the injuries, the death, the fear, all that sort of stuff. But the stories are about, you know, the scars and the injuries we couldn't see that they came back with. And I think that's a perfect example of truth in fiction. You know, I love that collection. That, to me, that was just brilliant. It's one of my books that I always have.
I just wrote that down, like other things, because I'm a product of that era, and
Right.
and the vestiges, although I was never there, the vestiges of that are still very much inside me, and I write quite a bit about Vietnam as growing up in the 60s and 70s, becoming who I am, and having to deal uh, with that. As a matter of fact, uh, the back of Tortoise, um,
Yes.
I'll send you the picture later, the full picture.
Okay.
That's something I drew in 1970 as an expression uh, about Vietnam in particular, how I
It
felt.
is, yeah, it is a brilliant book. It's so moving. It's one of those things like it should be a must read, I think, certainly for American kids in school. And I just downloaded the Audible version, and Bryan Cranston does the Audible version, which is, wonderful. So yeah, it's a great book and a great uh, just like there's nothing that isn't wonderful and perfect about that collection.
Yeah, yeah, I have to check it out. Definitely. And Bryan Cranston,
Yeah,
he's great. It's powerful,
really
and it's
great.
funny. There's so much written about it, but I don't think enough. I don't think enough. Enough lessons, enough feelings. Um, it's. I just don't think enough has been, and tons have been paid. And I spent part of the pandemic watching Ken Burns' Vietnam, just to feel. I want to feel, and he did a wonderful. It was a long,
Okay.
long documentary. I don't know,
Yeah.
10 or 12. And I just can't get enough of that to experience it and everything involved and stuff. Anyway, and it sits with me, and of course I work on a lot of guilt, which I write about. Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
Moving on. Um, can fiction like reveal uh, emotional truths more honestly than even a memoir? Can fiction do better in revealing truths than a memoir, do you think?
Not to take anything away from a memoir writer in front of me.
Of
Um,
course.
I think it can, because I think what fiction does is it takes away any hesitation or fear the writer has about being brutally honest about something. You can be honest when you're telling a truth in fiction. So I think there's a freedom that's given to the writer there. Also, there's another one of my favorite collections is a book called Five Little Indians by Michelle Good, a Canadian writer. And it is about probably the darkest period of Canadian history, and that's the history of residential schools. And it's a collection of connected short stories about five kids who survived the residential school experience. And like it is such a powerful book. I couldn't read it all at once. I had to put it down, pick it up, put it down, pick it up because it's a hard thing to read. And it's not graphic at all, at all, at all, at all. But there's neither is there anything left to the imagination. You know what happened to these kids, right? And I think that I have also read, real life accounts by Indigenous people who have survived the residential school system. And I'm just, in awe of their ability and courage to recount the horrors they witnessed and experienced. But I think when it's in fiction, it might have a wider appeal, which in this case is a good thing. Like more people should read about what happened in the residential schools. It's hard to read accounts of residential school survivors. Putting in fiction, as I say, it wasn't an easy read, but I think it can reach a wider audience, and I think that's an important thing. And as we talked about just before we got on, Calvin, memoir can lead to short story writing because there's a tortoise in my hair. I told you I'm on chapter 5, and I think there's like 50 short stories in there already.
Mm,
There's so much fodder. Like it's just like it's amazing. It could like easily be turned into a collection of short stories or many, many collections because you've had so many incredible experiences and you do write in a very literary style. So I'm in favor of that.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, have you ever written something, written a story that reveals something to you that uh, you didn't like consciously know in general, and all of a sudden, oh wow, you have an oh wow moment because you didn't realize that, you didn't know it. You learned something from yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I have. And it's uncomfortable sometimes when I do. Um, I don't often have light bulb moments, but I have had light bulb moments when I'm writing something and I think, oh, that's how you were really feeling or thinking, and you didn't want to tell anybody that, that type of thing. But another thing that happens is that, as I'm sure most writers experience, you learn from your characters and narrators as you're writing, and they take the story in different directions sometimes, and you do find out things about the story you're writing that you didn't know you knew.
Okay. Your stories uncover things and truths hidden in ordinary life. Um, why are everyday moments to you so powerful? Everyday moments are so powerful.
They are powerful to me. They're the most powerful to me, Calvin. There's that saying, truth is stranger than fiction, which I think is 100% accurate. Your life is a perfect example of that. Like they're so rich, it's like you couldn't make it up. And I think that everyday life experience where you learn something, you observe something, you inhale something, that some kind of knowledge, that makes the best writing. I mean, that's my favorite type of writing, where I read a very normal thing happening that changes a person's life, sort of. So that's why I love that type of writing.
Okay. Why do I like this? Why do secrets fascinate us? Secrets fascinate us as human beings.
Um, I think I think sometimes it's just the person. Sometimes people are just nosy and gossipy, and that's why secrets fascinate us. But I also think those secrets, those types of observations, where you just like have that aha moment, and I know you've had many of them yourself. Um, that's that's what makes a life when you go through life and you have those moments, and it's like a sudden observation, sudden clarity, sudden understanding. I think, from a secret, from just something that isn't said out loud. I think that's the magic of life.
Nicely said. The magic of life. Yeah, it is kind of magical. Come to think of it.
Well,
Uh,
yours certainly is, yeah.
yeah, well, when you become an octogenarian and you sit on the front porch, with prune juice on the rocks, and you're in a rocking chair, and you look back, it has been a wonderful life, just like the movie. It has been, and you get all these perspectives. And then there's something else that a lot of people don't explore today, especially in the age of AI. And I'm just shooting from the hip here. It's something called crystallized intelligence that I discovered. Crystallized intelligence is nothing more than saying, well, I'm an octogenarian, I'm a septuagenarian, so when, every decade in life you accumulate such a massive amount of knowledge that nothing can take it away. And it's there, and as long as the blood flow to the cerebral processes is unimpeded, that crystallized intelligence is worth its weight in gold, and AI can't duplicate this stuff up here. And that's what crystallized intelligence is, our learning, your experiences, your learning, your journey, and that's what you write about. Uh, it's funny.
My
I'm
my
thinking,
brother, who's approaching an octogenarian. He's has a fifth floor apartment in Peterborough where we grew up, and he spends most of the summer on his balcony. Um, and he calls it the Situation Room, like
I
you.
like that.
You know, he just
I
sits there
like
and
that.
observes the world.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Um, your characters you create, have they taught you about this wonderful word called vulnerability? Do you explore that stuff in your vulnerability of people?
I do, and it's I think it makes for a better read. Like I think it makes for a more interesting character when you expose that vulnerability. It's and it's not something that comes easily to me because I haven't had a lot of adversity in my life, and so when I'm exploring the vulnerability in a character, I really have to make sure I'm going as far as I need to go. Um, so in that way, the characters don't just teach me about vulnerability, they're teaching me about the craft of writing too, and how to explore that and how to explain that, and how to write about that.
I like that too. I'm writing that down. Well, it's important stuff. It really is. Um, okay, we'll take a little bit of a break. I kind of forewarned you. We're going to go a little bit off topic. I like to do this.
Yep, yep.
One of my favorite, I think my favorite journalist of all time is Barbara Walters. And not enough is being written about her and stuff. What a pioneer, and the things she accomplished. But anyway, I plagiarized some of her questions, and here's one I like.
Okay.
And here goes: excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with, and there could be a couple. There's no rules. It's a
So
provocative question.
having listened to your pod, I've actually given some thought to this question.
Aha! So you knew it was coming. Oh, gee.
So it's tough. Like I have this thing about never wanting to meet my heroes, but I thought about it and I thought it would have to be a Canadian author, obviously. And I landed on Morley Callahan, who wrote, well, a lot of great books, but he wrote That Summer in Paris, and it was about a summer he spent in Paris with Hemingway and Fitzgerald in 1929. And he was a wonderful writer. And all the Canadian writers from, the 30s and the 40s and the 50s were just all, I've read a lot of their books, and they're just really wonderful writers. So Morley Callahan would be the one.
Hey, by the way, I have a by the way for you.
Yes.
The by the way is when Kirkus gave me their star, um, which changed my life. I actually met with Kirkus recently, talking about the billionaire, and I told them, accusingly, I told them, you give me that Kirkus star, my life's never been the same. But they compared me to two writers in the review they wrote up.
Yes.
One was John Irving, The World According to Garp.
Wow.
Yeah, that's in the review they wrote. They compared my writing to, huge. I mean,
Yeah.
huge.
Huge,
And the other
Calvin.
was a Canadian writer,
Uh-huh.
and his name, he wrote The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz, which became a movie with Richard Dreyfuss. I forgot his name. Oh, but a Canadian writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, yep. Off camera,
Yeah. Yeah.
off camera,
Yeah.
I'll remember. But yeah, absolutely. In the review, compared me to those two writers,
Yeah.
the style, and I was deeply honored. Um, next question, I always like to ask this too, especially now, and I'm doing all this stuff with the film festival. Do you have any favorite movies?
Probably, I'm not a big movie watcher, but I would say probably the movie I've seen I would say in the last 15 years that has moved me the most, and there hasn't been a lot, would be Incendie by Denis Villeneuve.
Okay,
Yeah.
good answer. Hey, yeah, I just wrote my first, because Kay has moved me and led, our fearless leader has led me to putting up my first LinkedIn newsletter. And the whole the whole big picture front of the beginning of the newsletter is the movie Casablanca.
Yeah. One of my mom and dad's one of their favorite movies.
Just it's so powerful, and you know that your mom and dad are from that era. You know, as my
Yeah.
mom,
Yeah.
mom and dad were from that era, and the way that movie captured it, and what I've come to learn more recently is people have now said that screenplay may be the greatest screenplay ever written. To appreciate what these two screenwriters did in a matter of 3 days. 3 days they banged that thing out. They knew what they wanted to
Wild.
do. They knew everything. In 3 days they read a screenplay. Screenplays
Yeah.
aren't long. I told you I have the whole
Yes.
screenplay for One True Thing. It's like 80, 90 pages. It's not long. And, they make a 2.5 hour movie out of that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, back to work, Lisa.
Okay.
All right, back to work. What makes first person narration especially intimate? These are things I don't really know. Um,
So I think I compare it to what radio hosts do because I heard years and years ago radio hosts were taught to speak as if they're only speaking to one person, and that makes it more personable and more real. And I equate first person narration to that sort of very similar approach. It makes it feel more personal and more real, that the reader is hearing from the writer directly. And also, one of the things I always try to do, again, it's a concept that someone told me years ago when I started writing, and it's come to, since it's a psychologist, I forget his name, who first came up with this concept of taking the personal and making it universal. And I think, the first person narrative gives a lot of power to that
mhm,
concept of taking the personal and making it universal.
okay. Uh, Along the same lines, when do you decide like a narrator should be speaking directly to the reader?
It's not something I do consciously. I write that way. It's just the way it flows. Sometimes, you know, it's not my decision. Sometimes it's the narrator, the character's decision.
Mhm.
Sometimes it is my decision. I think like I feel like I just want to turn to the reader and just sort of lean out from behind the page and just say, you know what else? This is something else you need to know. So sometimes I do that on purpose, but a lot of the time it just flows that way.
So does a narrator actually take you somewhere that you didn't expect to be going as it's
Yeah,
developing?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That happens so often, Calvin. And it's not something you can explain to the non-writer. Like non-writers think, well, you're the one writing, you must know what happens, right? But that's not the way it works. It's not the way it works in fiction, and it doesn't matter what genre, I don't think, or what voice you're using. Like I have had that experience where I'm writing something and I think I know what the story is, and then all of a sudden something happens that I wasn't aware of. And I'm sitting here going, wait, what? Like you have a twin? I didn't know that, It's that type of thing. Yeah, that definitely happens.
Okay. Okay. All right. Now we'll talk a little bit about from behind the fourth wall, which by the end of the day I will have in my possession. And sometimes I do things backwards. I should have done this. Uh, I should have done this before, but these last 2 weeks, I'm just not thinking clearly because it's been intense. But anyway, so and I said, whoops, um, here we go. Okay, I said, early on, talking about the shedding, my stalker, and I was reading, the which I'm going to have. The shedding really interests me because I like dystopian stuff and so what inspired you, Lisa, to do this collection?
It was a bit of a backwards process, and it had to do with when I wrote My Stalker, which is a story about cancer, and I couldn't find a home for it. because I don't know if you've read a lot about cancer, but all the publications, at least in Canada, who publish stories about cancer want uplifting, positive stories. And my stalker is not. It's dark and raw, and there's nothing uplifting about it. And so, my kids were saying, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I guess I just won't publish it. And my son said, well, you should self-publish it. And I didn't know you could. So I had that, and I had Shedding, which has been published in a literary journal. And then I was working on How We Disappear. And he said, well, you need to publish them all. And you need, because he has also worked with Kay, he said it should be a series because a series is better. So it was like a marketing decision almost. And then so I was thinking, well, how can I how can I link these three stories together? They're very different stories. And I realized it wasn't the content, it was the style of writing. And the style of writing was that I speak directly to the reader.
Wow. I like that. I like that a lot. Um, Help me out with this one. What does the fourth wall symbolize in human relationships?
I'm sure you've seen it, Calvin. I think yeah, we know people who have falsehoods and pretenses in their life, relationships that aren't genuine. And I think they're hiding behind a wall. And I think, if they read about taking away that wall, or if they read about people who are, you know, in a position where the writer is speaking directly to them, they will see that in their lives. But I see it in people I know where it feels like nothing in their life is genuine.
Okay. I mentioned the shedding my stalker and how we disappear. Is there any one of those that has a personal?
Shedding.
Okay, okay, you answered that really fast. The
I
shedding.
wrote that. It was I was 2 years into the pandemic, and I'd had a dry spell, Calvin. Like, the pandemic was declared, we got locked in our homes, and I had nothing to say. And I realized I have to be in the world to say something, right? So I just thought maybe I'll never write again. And so 2 years in, to me it felt, and I don't know, I think it probably felt this way to a lot of people. I felt like 2 years felt like 10 years. Like I felt like I had been locked away and isolated for 10 years. And I actually wondered, was this the dawn of a dystopian period of human history? That's what it felt like at the time, you know? And then I woke up one day, and this thought of, like, is this what life is going to be like? Like, I woke up one morning and the story was there, completely there. It was all in one. That's the story. It took me like a week to write it down, and it was done. And plus, I also like that it's something I will never forget how I felt during that time. And we were talking about Vietnam and World War II, and my parents didn't talk about World War II very much at all. I mean, it's typical. I know it's typical of people from who lived through war. They don't want to talk about it, and we understand why. But I know I will never forget how I felt at that point in the pandemic. And so I love that story. There's a lot about it. I love it.
Yeah,
About it, I love.
and
So,
that's the one that, as I'm reading, the descriptions, that's the one that really grabbed me, powerfully, for a lot of reasons.
well, I hope you enjoy it. Thank
I'll
you.
let, I'll keep you posted for sure, for sure. Um, you've been published in literary journals, which is a wonderful accomplishment. Um,
Thank you.
what does that teach you about your craft as a short story writer?
You know, it let me trust myself in my writing, and it gives you a lot of validation. There is no better feeling than you get an email from someone saying, your story has been accepted for publication. And it gives you a lot of credibility that you can use as you go forward. It makes you think that you're an amateur, a pro, not an amateur anymore, and just having someone who has taken the time to create a journal, and they don't know you, and they read your story, and they think your writing is good enough that other people should read it. I mean, it means a lot. It has always meant a lot to me.
Okay. Uh, Taking that, just going off topic a bit,
Yeah.
um, for you to comment publicly. You and I have, you know where I'm going with this. Yeah, I brought this next topic up. It's heavy and it's unresolved and it's heavy, and you were a big proponent of this, which was a bright light for me, a bright light bulb for me, and how, because I brought this up to the group a few weeks ago, and just to share, because I don't think people who are really close to me, I mean really close, we're talking about, nieces and some of the best friends we have in the world, can understand me and what it feels to be an author, and the sacrifices and the loneliness, and the pain of the whole process. And then when those people who are so near and dear uh, don't even, press a button and pick up a copy just as a show of support, what it does to you. You want to comment on that? It's kind of an open, because you kind of
Yeah.
supported my thinking,
Yeah.
and I thought I was kind of an outlier and lonely in my thinking, that until you surfaced.
And I thought I was an outlier. You, then you made that comment in our Monday night chat, and I was like, I'm not the only one who feels that way. I'm, I don't take offense. I'm just always astounded that people aren't as impressed as I am when I get published. Like, it's a big deal to get published. Like, for me, it's a huge deal and a huge accomplishment, I think. It is, I'm always thrilled and I'm pleased and I'm proud of my publishing credits. And I think people just don't understand, like you say, what it's like to sit in front of a blank page and crank something out and think, is this good enough for other people to read? And uh, yeah, I don't know if only other writers can truly appreciate what writers do, like I don't know. It's a tough question, but it's something
Yeah.
we face, and I'm lucky in that, my family, as I said, my kids, Jim and Haley, are kind of my management team now, and my siblings have always been incredibly supportive. My brother, who, you know, he's not a reader. He worked in a factory all his life, not a literary person. He doesn't own a Kindle or anything like that. So if I have something published, I print it out and I mail it to him. And he understands my stories like 1,000%. He always gets it. And, so I'm lucky that in my family, I get a lot of appreciation and support. But, there isn't a lot outside of that.
No, I know. And we talked also before, putting together a little panel of us authors to express our feelings,
Yeah.
because I just don't think we're in the mainstream, meaning people really understand everything involved. And you're, like you said, you're one of the first persons to really acknowledge and support that thinking, because I thought I was alone, but
Yeah,
I'm
and I thought I was alone.
yeah,
I thought I'm a selfish person, thinking that people don't like what I do. And when you commented on it, I thought I
yeah,
felt so, oh, justified in my thinking.
yeah. It's part of my life. Now it's part of it, it's part of a mission.
Yeah.
It's like before it's too late. And I can't deny who I am, and I can't deny these feelings. And they're powerful feelings, because spending 5 years in this chair, which I actually wore out, I had to get a new one. The arms, I actually
I
wore out the
believe
arms.
you. I
This is
believe
my
you.
second chair in 5 years, because you're sitting here so much. But so it's just something that you and I are going to explore, and kind of get some people involved. Thanks to you,
Yeah.
'cause by the way, you were that kindling wood, that spark. When Tom Hanks is on that island in Castaway, and
Yes.
he's rubbing the wood, and that one little, You know, that one little spark, that was a song. One little spark starts a fire. I forgot.
Yeah,
No, it was a song, a spark starts a fire. I forgot.
yeah.
I forgot. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. Is there some kind of a demarcation that separates back to work that separates literary fiction from commercial fiction?
Sales, that would be the big one.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, know about that.
Um, so I think, and I love commercial fiction, popular fiction. I love all of that. I don't think there's more merit in one than there is in the other. I read both. I don't. I'm not a snob when it comes to reading. I'll read anything. And someone recommends a book, I need one recommendation. That's it. I'll go pick it up. And so, but the size of the market is a big distinction. And like as a short fiction literary writer, that I'm looking at that as a positive thing. And I didn't know until just recently, till I joined the network, that when I learned about the market I'm in, I didn't know how small it was. But that means I'm not up against other, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of top best-selling novel writers. I have more chance for success, I think. The other big distinction, of course, is style, because in literary fiction, the style is as important as the story. Like how you tell the story is as important as what the story is. And it also, the thing I love about literary fiction, you have such tremendous freedom in how you handle your character or narrator's challenges and conflicts and how you end it. I love the freedom you get in literary fiction for
Mhm.
crafting a story.
It's
And
nice
you, as
because
I said, you are a very literary writer. You have a very literary style.
and I never knew, I was never a writer. I mean, everything I studied was science. That's the funny thing. My whole life, everything was geared to becoming a pharmacist, science and chemistry, everything I hated. And my abhorrence with the curriculum, led to some funny, incidents in how to avoid the actual uh, um, studying, inculcation of all this science stuff. I mean, I just found ways to not. I was trying to be creative. I just didn't want to study that stuff because it didn't do anything. It was never living. History is living. English is living.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
test tube is not living. So and of course, I didn't know what was inside, my belly. Anyway, do your stories begin with voice, image, or emotion? How do you, what's that
So I
spark?
would, yeah, I would say they start with an observation, usually of an emotion, and they could be, or an image. It could be an observation of an image. I see somebody walking down the street in a certain way. They have a certain something about them, and I imagine a million different things about them. So it's an observation, often of an emotion. Again, if that's I said that, like telling stories about family dynamics or relationships or anything like that. Like there's, you know, a lot of fodder there for short story writing. So I might observe something that I feel in a relationship that, gives birth to a whole story. And then the voice follows, and it usually follows pretty quickly. And again, it's not a decision I make. Like usually, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like as a fiction writer, and this is what I said when, sometimes the characters and narrators, they direct the story, they tell me stuff I didn't know. So I feel like, you know, I'll wake up and it's like there's someone talking to me saying, I have a story to tell and I choose you. And it's like, okay. And I start getting a name and I'm getting a story and I feel like I'm taking notes. I'm not writing, I'm actually just taking notes. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, I'm not a short story writer, but is there a point when you know that a story is finished? I mean, semi-obvious, or you're not sure, you can take it longer.
Funny you asked that because when I was, I gave a presentation to a writers group in Florida recently, and that was a question that came up. And
Oh, oh,
someone said, "Do you know if there's a book about how and when you end a story?" And I said, "I don't know one, but maybe you should write it." I never know. I just stop writing. I think it's a question that every author probably deals with, and it's a tough question.
yeah. When I approached my ending, I wasn't sure about it, and
Yeah,
and and there was one ending, and that's how your intuition comes into play for you too, doesn't it? You just have
100%.
100%. Okay, okay.
It drives my writing so much. And when I was talking about the how great it is when someone accepts your story, and that sometimes stories come in, and I'm just sort of feel like I'm taking notes. This is what happened with shedding. This is a perfect example. There's been 3 or 4 times where I've woken up in the morning like it was shedding and the story's there, and I have a solid first draft in a week or two, and I've got a completed story in a month, and I send it out, and I get within a week I have it accepted somewhere. Um, and when that happens, I know my intuition was right. Like, and it was intuition driving it, and I was right about it, and that was the case with shedding. I I had from the time I woke up and the story was in my head till the time I submitted was probably no more than 4 weeks. I think I sent it to 3 publications on a Sunday, and by Wednesday, one of them had said, "We're
Wow,
accepting your story." Yeah,
wow. Powerful word, intuition.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Um, uh, and it's different. It's a bit different for you, for me, because you're short and I'm long. And actually,
yeah,
it's the height thing. You're short and I'm tall. It continues. It's just different, and the intuition, and my intuition lives with me for 5 years while I'm doing this, and until it gets a chance to play out, on stage. But it's a 5 year kind of intuition. Short stories a little bit quicker for things for intuition to reach its fruition. I just made that up. Sounds
yeah. No, it's true.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, this is tried and true. What do you hope readers feel after finishing one of your stories, in particular, generalization?
I mean, I hope they're satisfied, and I hope they're left thinking about it. Really, that's what you want. You want them to walk away with something that made them think, that made them feel a certain way, and made them remember the story. I think we've all had that experience where well, like I said, with Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, like books like that you're just never going to forget.
Okay. In your experience, have readers ever shared some really potent things with you that kind of moved them after reading you?
With my cancer story, that's probably what I had the most comments, most responses from, and everybody's dealt with cancer, right? So it's not everybody's had cancer touch their lives in one way or another. So um, people like the rawness of that story because, as I said, it's not a happy story at all. It's very raw. Um, I also I have a friend that I've just become friends with in the last few years, and I had given her a collection of my other collection, Secrets Untold. And she and I spin together, and she came to spin class one Sunday morning, and she'd read it, and she said, "Oh, Lisa, this was great. I read your story. I loved it all, except for except for that story." And it was the title story, Secrets Untold. And I said, "Why didn't you like that one, Kristen?" She said, "Well, like, how did it end?" So in that story, the main character has a huge decision to make, and it ends with her that she's on the precipice of making that decision, but you don't know what the decision is. And Kristen said, like, how did it end? I want to know. Like, it was so great to hear her say that because I thought, like, she took these stories seriously, like she read them and she was still thinking about it and wondering about it. And it meant a lot to me that she felt that way. And that she said to me, like, what? And she said, "What did she do?" And I had to disappoint her because I said, "Well, I don't know what she did." The story ended. I can't tell you. I don't know any more than you do. So.
Interest. When you finish a story, is there ever the note of because it resonated, because it was powerful? Are these stories, what I'm trying to say, these stories when they end, or is there such a thing as a sequel to a short story?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
definitely.
okay. You haven't done
Yeah.
that yet, but
I'm working on it.
oh, I didn't know. I didn't know. And all that you've done, Lisa, has the writing you've done and the explorations and the depth to which you go, has it changed the way you see people?
It changes the way I look at people.
Okay.
I don't think I see
Okay.
people differently. It definitely changes the way I look at people.
Okay. Okay.
And um, I think I don't know if you do the same thing, Calvin. Like because I'm a writer, it's embarrassing. Like sometimes I feel like I'm staring. Like I look at someone that strikes me in a different way, and I want to see what they're wearing and how they walk and how they talk and how they interact with other people. And I feel like I'm taking notes mentally all the time, you know. And I will use that, real or imagined
Okay.
observations in my writing.
Okay. Because in my writing, I latch onto real characters uh,
Yes,
and I try to
that's
bring them,
exactly it.
yeah,
Exactly it.
characters that Reader's Digest back maybe before your time used to have a
Oh no, it wasn't before my time.
okay. Well, they used to have that series, the most unforgettable character I ever met, and sometimes when I'm writing, I always look for unforgettable characters in my life to try to bring them back, if in fact it warrants my bringing them back. Um, okay, as we wind down, and once again to pay homage and tribute to our fearless leader, Kay, uh,
Yes.
your words of advice for fellow authors and about being in a community of authors like the Bold Authors Network, and how important it is for writers to be in community, which is huge. Your parting thoughts on that?
So I think like everybody in the Bold Authors Network, Mondays at 4, the highlight of my week,
Yeah,
and I think the network, like the diversity of the writing styles, the diversity of people, I love it. Like I love every minute of it. I love every second that I'm staring at those people in the blocks, Calvin.
yeah,
We are such an interesting group. I love our group. And I've
really
learned
is.
so much, like from the presentations and from the workshops, from other people sharing their stories. I mean, it really is a fabulous group. And I think one of the things that makes it special is that we don't talk about the craft. We talk about success and helping each other. And I think that's what makes it so, so special. And it's been remarkable to me. And I think it's more important than ever now. Because well, as if we talked about, we don't get a lot of support from non-writers. I mean, if you're Stephen King or someone famous, you probably get lots of support from everybody around the world, but people like you and I don't. But also, like, you can be friends with people across the globe, but I think we are more isolated than we have ever been in real life. So having that community is, I mean, it's remarkable. And this really, Kay has created just magic in that group. It has just been phenomenal. I love that group so much. I talk about it to people all the time.
Matter of fact, I just thought of this. I'm working, as I interview a prolific amount of authors, because I'm a magnet and I'm always drawn. If somebody's an author, I want to
Yeah,
do what I can, and provide a platform. So I interviewed a very interesting woman from Montreal uh, this past week. Really
yeah,
interesting. She came to me actually from Poland. Go figure. She's French Canadian. And actually, I had a hard time with her accent because, oh, it was heavy. It was. I'm kind of putting my head right up to the screen here. I'm trying to listen. I'm not used to that heavy French accent. But I work with this Polish. They have they have one of the leading web services business in the continent, the European continent. I don't know how he found me, but Lorenz Tyson found me and liked my channel and liked the stuff I was doing, and we Zoomed and became friends, and he has this public relations business here in the States. He said, "You want to interview some of these people from time to time?" Yeah, sure. I'm a retired guy. I got the time, sure. And anyway, I've been doing this for the past year, but he sent me this uh, um, I'm trying to remember her last name, Oksana. Her name is Oksana Ali. And I looked at her, before I say yes, I want to see if it's something I could sink my teeth into. And she's into dental health and how important that is. And I've read a million articles. We don't have a clue how important the mouth is to this as an anti-dementia thing, and to the heart, because bacteria from the mouth goes down here and it causes some alterations in the arteries, and it's a focus for plaque to form, and it can lead to atherosclerosis. All these things, we think we're so advanced, medically, but we don't know a hell of a lot. We'll know a lot more in the years to come with AI helping us. But anyway, she was great, and she was so informative. So of course she's writing a book. Boom. When I heard that, I said, well,
Yeah.
off air, I said, we got this great support group.
Yeah.
Do drop by. It's wonderful. So she may show up. She just sent me a note before we went on air. I looked at it. But anyway, I recruit, and probably 25% of, both authors came from conversation with Calvin.
I know that we've often, there'll be a new member and they'll be introducing, and they'll say, "Oh, I know Calvin because of this, and he brought me into this group."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And why? Because I believe. I believe in the mission and what she's doing and everything about it. So it's I ain't selling anything. I'm just saying, where I come from and
I know
what I
I'm the same. I don't know a lot of writers, but I tell them, like there's this group, it's amazing and it's free. And again, like I've learned so much. I have never spent more time, like I joined, I think 8 months ago. I've spent more time in the last 8 months talking to, learning from, discussing things with other writers than I have at any other time in my life.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I love it. I love our when we have little breakout rooms, when you get
Sure.
more of a chance to do one-on-one. I mean, it's all brilliant. And
She's
then because
brilliant.
we're making these connections like you and I have, and I have, with Anne and with Jack, and it's, it's just really, really wonderful.
It's wonderful. It's great stuff. To be
Yeah.
continued.
Yeah.
And this will be continued because, of course, you can come back anytime, and I
Thank
know
you.
you're going to jump into this panel, which I'd love to do.
Yeah.
I'd love to do, and you're going to be right there with it to explore boundaries, and we'll figure all that out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop
Yes.
recording.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me, Calvin. It's been lovely and
No, it has
wonderful.
been wonderful. And enjoy the snow out there.
Yeah, I
Better
won't.
you than me. And the nice thing about ending this before is I can say, I'll see you Monday,
See you Monday.
see you Monday. So don't leave. I'm just going to stop recording.
Okay.
Don't leave. Boom. Here we go.